So a couple of years ago, I made a video about licensed games, games based on pre-existing non-gaming properties like TV characters and eggs and whatnot. Wow, it's crazy how many videos I've made and
Accidentally deleted since then.
Anyway, in that older video, I mentioned that I'm particularly fond of licensed games from the GameCube PS2 era, bona fide classics like Spongebob Battle for Bikini Bottom, Family Guy Game, etc. Games that were never gonna win any awards or anything, but were silly little distractions from my childhood trauma. Well, not counting the Family Guy game, I never owned that one, but never owning the Family Guy game is what gave me the trauma in the first place. But anyway, I'm here, I'm excited, and I have dozens of new licensed games I want to talk about today. Well, maybe not dozens, but believe me, we are going to discuss quite a few.
I have 2 games I want to talk about. Hey, that's a respectable number of games for one single video. These games both came out within the last couple years, and more importantly, they perfectly harken back to those GameCube era license titles, in terms of their shortcomings and their tall comings. Wait, what?
But before we begin, let me quickly mention 2 other licensed games I've played recently that I just don't have much to say about. The first one is Star Wars Jedi Fallen Order. That game is good. Yeah, I liked it. Really not into Star Wars though, so not much else to it. I mean, it's a good game that I liked. Moving on. Next is Multiverses, a platform fighter where you duke it out as various Warner Brothers characters such as I can't remember. I want to say Joker? Oh, Harley Quinn is playable, but Joker isn't? What? Alright then, yeah, I'm just not a fan of this one. Really don't like it one bit, to be totally honest. Apparently I spent about 16 hours just trying to force myself into a Stockholm Syndrome situation, but
I don't know, the emphasis on 2v2 matchups, which isn't really my thing, the boring visuals and boring stage designs and boring music, the boring repetition, the lack of things to do, the somewhat slow floaty movement, and of course the microtransaction crap.
But yeah, I won't dwell on Multiverses, and I sincerely hope that the people who like it are liking it. But it is funny, while I feel that the next 2 games are good modern representations of my favorite aspects of licensed classics,
Multiverses is a perfect representation of everything wrong with games today, licensed or not.
But yeah, beautifully segueing from Multiverses, the first game I actually want to talk about is Nickelodeon All-Star Brawl, baby. That's right, I'm one of those freaks. I actually really like this game. I've mentioned before that I have no credibility, and this is exactly what I was talking about. But don't worry, I'm still gonna criticize it. I like criticizing things I like. I think that is a fun and normal thing to do. So like Multiverses, Nick Brawl is a 2D platform fighter. No, I won't use the term Smash clone. Smash 64 came out over 20 years ago. Platform fighters are a subgenre of fighting games at this point. Get over it. Anyway, yeah, this game made quite the splash when it was announced back in 2021. See, this is a fighting game with Spongebob in it, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with this Spongebob fella, but he's a pretty big deal with the young people. So of course, memes of this game were coming in hot and fast right from the start, with a lot of them crowning this as the quote-unquote Smash killer, since unlike Smash Ultimate, it would have rollback netcode capabilities. What exactly is rollback netcode in comparison to whatever netcode that Ultimate uses?
Well, it has something to do with internet, and look, I don't know, okay? I'm a 27-year-old man sitting in my closet praising the Nickelodeon fighting game. I don't even have pants on right now.
What I do know is that once this game eventually came out, it went from being the Smash killer to itself being killed. I'm funny. The launch for this game was not good, seeing as it was obviously unfinished. And not just unfinished like how a lot of games feel unfinished at launch nowadays. Like, I'm not just talking about bugs or content being locked behind paid DLC. No. This game came out without Garfield the cat being playable despite him being planned for the base roster. That is a crime. And as if that wasn't bad enough, data miners found all sorts of content buried in the files that didn't make it to launch, such as fully designed items and unfinished stages. Plus, there actually were a ton of bugs. The splash screen was aligned incorrectly on the Switch version for like 2 months. I don't know how that's possible. And that's not even mentioning the lack of voice acting at the time. Well, I did just mention it, so yeah, the lack of voice acting really was the final nail in the coffin for a lot of people. What's the point of playing as SpongeBob if you won't be hit with a every 3 seconds? Over the next 12 months, the game was patched up, and it did eventually get voice acting and items and such, and also an additional character pack for $10, which I actually bought, Jesus Christ. But it was all too little too late. These days, I only ever see Nick Brawl brought up when it's the butt of some bad joke about dead games. It's really sad to see. But if you're familiar with this game, you probably already knew most of that. So why do I love it so much, despite all the problems? Even I don't really know. Well, I'll try and explain. I mentioned earlier that I find the movement in multiverses to be slow and floaty, which is especially noticeable when you play 1v1, since that game was balanced around the 2v2 team mechanics. But Nick Brawl is the opposite. It was only developed with 1v1 in mind, and in my opinion, that's the one thing this game does just right. I don't think everybody would like how it feels. It's similar to Melee in the sense that it's easy enough to pick up and play, but has a lot of depth under the hood that could be a bit alienating. And to be clear, I'm not trying to imply that I'm a pro at this game. Quite the opposite, in fact. These deeper mechanics frighten me, but hey, I did learn how to wave dash. That's kind of cool. But yeah, even if I do suck at it, which I do, I still find this game to be an absolute blast, mainly because I enjoy the fast-paced nature of it so much. Characters feel tight and snappy and responsive, and various other words. But even besides that, looking at the game overall, it's in a pretty decent place at this point. 25 characters if you're a moron like me and include the 3 paid ones. All the big Nick shows are represented, well, besides the Fairly Odd Parents, which is probably due to some sort of global licensing issue, so whatever, I guess. The art style is fine enough, minus some jank here and there. Like, this game has one of the only good 3D models of Jenny from My Life as a Teenage Robot that I've ever seen, but then Danny Phantom looks like this. Alright then. But anyway, I like almost all the stages, minus this floating platform Ren and Stimpy one, which is not fun. The soundtrack is pretty good, the voice acting is nice to have, though if I can be honest, I didn't really care that much about that in the first place. The game is objectively better with voice acting, so I'm not complaining about it, but it was never a big deal to me personally that it wasn't there, since I tend to tune out background noise when I start losing, which is not an uncommon occurrence.
But again, glad voice acting was added, and it's ridiculous that it launched without it.
What else? Oh yeah, Garfield is playable. For some reason, I kind of unironically like Garfield now. I don't know why, my brain's gotten mushier lately. And the online works. We were supposed to get crossplay over a year ago, which didn't end up happening, but it does work. Unfortunately, even if this game's netcode was the rollbackiest of all time, it doesn't matter because nobody's playing anymore. I have not been able to just stumble into a match since, I don't know, summer of last year, so over 6 months. And I'm not the most social guy, so I don't want to join a Discord server or subreddit to find matches. I would much rather sit in quiet isolation, which I enjoy so much.
But that's not an option here, because God abandoned us a long time ago.
It's such a shame, a totally predictable, fair shame based on the state that it launched in, but a shame nonetheless. It's especially sad because I don't think this game failed due to developer incompetence or because it's some sort of cash grab, though whoever decided to price this at $50 when it first came out is not somebody I respect. But yeah, I think this game mostly stumbled in execution because Nickelodeon has a habit of rushing games out the door with teeny tiny little budgets and even teenier development windows. I think that if Nick stepped back, absorbed the fact that this game was going viral, as the kids say, a few months before launch, and decided to give the devs maybe 6 more months to polish things up, things might have turned out differently. Am I wrong? Yeah, probably, but at least the game's reputation wouldn't be as bad, you know? But despite all of that, in its current state, if you manage to find people to play with, I can honestly recommend this game now. But again, only if you find people to play with. I cannot stress that enough. It's a great representation of what I love so much about my favorite GameCube era licensed games. It's simple and not the most refined, and there are obviously more polished alternatives. But the core gameplay really shines, it's loaded with charm, and it makes me feel happy to play. Well, it did, you know, back when I played it. Hey Nick Brawl devs, if you're out there, you guys did great work. Also, please put Otis from Barnyard in the sequel. It's literally all I want. I promise I'll recommend the game to all my friends if you do.
What they don't know is that I don't have any friends.
The second game I want to go on about actually just came out a little while ago, and that's SpongeBob SquarePants The Cosmic Shake. For some quick context, 2005's Battle for Bikini Bottom, the classic 3D platformer and by far the most famous SpongeBob game, got a full remake back in 2020. That remake sold well enough that the developers, Purple Lamp Studios, were given a larger budget and more resources to develop a sort of sequel, which, just think about that, a cult classic licensed game from 2005, not only being remade for modern consoles, but also getting a sequel? That does not happen, and it's seriously so cool even if Cosmic Shake did suck complete ass, which, believe it or not, it doesn't. So in Cosmic Shake, SpongeBob and his best friend Rick cause a problem, and then are forced to clean it up for about 7 to 9 hours. But really, the plot is just an excuse to call back to as many references from seasons 1 to 4 of the show as possible, which I think works out pretty well here. Look, I'm usually not a fan of corporations leaning into the memes of their properties this much. It gets tiring.
Like, we get it, that meme of Chicken SpongeBob is pretty popular, we get it!
But in this game, the references feel more deliberate and are integrated into the story pretty naturally.
Sure, there are a couple of eye roll moments, and of course the stupid chicken meme is here too, you idiot, of course it is. I will hurt myself if I have to see this goddamn thing one more time, I'm serious.
But a lot of these references feel more obscure. You can really tell that this game was made by genuine fans of the series. One of the costumes is from that episode where SpongeBob pretends to be Squidward. They had to totally warp his character model for this to work, and it's not even the only costume that does that. It's honestly really cool. But anyway, the game has 7 levels, as well as a Bikini Bottom hub world that features challenges and opens up as you progress through the story. The levels feel like amalgamations of various moments from the show, like a cowboy version of Jellyfish Fields, a Halloween version of Rock Bottom, and so on. Each is fairly linear, but you're given room to run around and find collectibles, and there are various moments where the gameplay switches up, like these areas where you have to balance on a floating rock, which sort of reminds me of the Starball levels from Mario Galaxy. I love the Starball! But by far the best part of the game is SpongeBob himself. He is a dream to control. His speed is just right, and you unlock new abilities as you progress. Once I got this homing attack, it was all over. I was zipping through levels, bouncing on enemies to get around, having a nice time. The controls aren't perfect, like this grapple move feels sort of awkward, but thankfully it's context sensitive so you won't have to use it too much. But yeah, the simple act of getting around is a ton of fun, and there are even some really cool platforming challenges that force you to juggle through all of your moves. Honestly, I just wish there were more of them since the majority are optional post-game content.
Oh, also as an aside, I was watching a review where the guy said that it's easy to cheese some sections of the game, but he said it as if it's a bad thing. That guy's wrong is my point. It's not a bad thing, it's fun.
But yeah, I love this game. For the first playthrough at least. In my opinion, the main flaw here is just the fact that there's a ton of backtracking. See, unlike Battle for Bikini Bottom for the most part, each level features several collectibles and platforming challenges and whatnot that can only be beaten after unlocking abilities that you get way later in the game. So once I figured that out, I decided to only do the bare minimum to get through the story and then go back through levels to grab all the extra stuff. And yeah, on this cleanup mission, the novelty did start wearing off a bit, especially because it's unclear where exactly you need to go to find everything. And since this is a fairly linear game with levels featuring segmented zones, it did get annoying having to just bounce from area to area, desperately trying to find everything. It sort of reminded me of the post-game content that you get at the end of Mario Odyssey. What was it? Moon Rocks? Honestly, I just hate when 3D platformers don't let you grab all the collectibles on your first run. I don't enjoy feeling like I'm only going back to old levels to complete a checklist. Thankfully, it doesn't really matter because the game still rocks, and the first playthrough was so solid that I can easily recommend it, especially considering the $40 price tag. Oh, and I didn't even mention, it's funny! The voice actors all killed it unsurprisingly, and like I said, you can tell that this game was made by SpongeBob fans. There were a few moments that actually got me, like, look at this.
I wish, if I were a balloon, I'd be able to do cool stuff like this!
But I guess the final question is this better than Battle for Bikini Bottom? Yes. Will it be as infinitely replayable? That I don't know yet, but what I can confidently say is that to me, the core game of Cosmic Shake is better than the core game of Battle for Bikini Bottom, and what really seals the deal, again, is just how well SpongeBob controls. As much as I love Battle for Bikini Bottom, I always did feel that the Patrick sections were dull compared to the SpongeBob and Sandy one since he's slower and less mobile, and this game just doesn't have that problem. Yeah, it isn't perfect, there are some technical issues, the boss fights are unremarkable, and the final boss actually just sucks, but god, this game makes me so happy. It somehow made me nostalgic for a game that didn't even exist when I was a kid, as if I've been playing it my whole life. It's a real gem, and honestly, I'm just glad that it even exists. Seriously, if you're into 3D platformers, do not overlook this one. It's better than you probably think. Well, that's it. Not gonna do a long outro for this one. Had a couple games I wanted to talk about, and I did. Ha! Whoops! Hey, but in all sincerity, I just want to say, thank you so much for watching. I appreciate it. I really, really do. But now if you'll excuse me, I want to go back to what I really enjoy doing, which is sitting in quiet isolation. Goodbye.